We head overseas to the fast-moving changes in Ukraine, signaling the Russians appear to have won this round, taking control of their prize, Crimea.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has reiterated his territorial claims to Taiwan, saying unification is inevitable.
You wake up to the breaking news that Taiwan didn't fall in a long war, it was taken in a long weekend. No declaration, no countdown, just a sudden, irreversible shift in reality. The question isn't, would China try? The question is sharper and more uncomfortable. If Beijing pulls a Crimea-style move on Taiwan, who reacts fast enough and who gets trapped by the fallout? This is why the region is on edge right now. China's latest drills aren't just military exercises. They're rehearsals for confusion, multi-zone, multi-domain, wrapped in the language of deterrence and foreign interference. Taiwan answers by signaling readiness and resolve, but everyone around the island is already doing the math. This isn't about choosing sides anymore. It's about proximity, timing, and consequences that hit before diplomats even book flights. Start with the Philippines. Over 100,000 Filipinos live and work in Taiwan. Caregivers, factory workers, families with kids. If something snaps, Manila's first problem isn't ideology. It's evacuation, airspace access, ports, and whether nearby bases suddenly become critical lifelines or liabilities. Japan's dilemma is even starker. Look at a map. Yonaguni Island sits barely more than 100 kilometers from Taiwan. Neutrality sounds nice in theory, but geography doesn't negotiate. That's why Japan has been hardening its southwest defenses, and why a former prime minister could openly say, a Taiwan emergency is a Japanese emergency. That line wasn't rhetoric, it was a warning. Then zoom out. South Korea watches all this with a different fear. Not invasion, but entanglement. A Taiwan crisis could pull US forces, stretch regional defenses, and force Seoul to prepare for pressure on the Korean peninsula at the worst possible moment. Different countries, different anxieties, but the same realization. A Crimea-style takeover wouldn't stay local. It would redraw risk maps overnight, force rapid decisions under uncertainty, and test whether Indo-Pacific alliances are built for speed or just for statements. That's the real tension here. Not tanks versus missiles, but time versus hesitation. And in a region where distance is measured in minutes, not miles, hesitation may be the most dangerous move of all. Before anyone talks about Taiwan, policymakers quietly replay one precedent, Crimea, 2014. Not because the geography matches, but because the method did. What shocked the world back then was not raw firepower, it was speed. Events moved so quickly that by the time statements were drafted and emergency meetings convened, the map had already changed. The Crimea method followed a cold, efficient logic. First came speed and surprise, a fait accompli engineered before diplomacy could even warm up. Then ambiguity, masked forces, proxies, and just enough deniability to slow consensus among outside powers. This was paired with information dominance, flooding the space with conflicting narratives to blur what was happening in real time.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has told a special session of Russia's parliament that Crimea has always been a part of Russia.
Add legal fog, referendums and selective appeals to self-determination, and the move gained a thin veneer of procedural legitimacy. Finally, there was sanctions tolerance. Moscow calculated correctly that it could absorb economic punishment long enough to lock in territorial gains. Here's the uncomfortable lesson decision-makers took away. Sanctions didn't reverse the map. They imposed costs. They isolated Russia diplomatically. But they did not undo the seizure, certainly not quickly. When an aggressor is prepared to endure isolation and economic pain, punitive measures alone rarely force an immediate rollback. By the time pressure builds, reality has already hardened. This is where the comparison to Taiwan becomes urgent and where it also breaks down.
The peace of the Taiwan Strait is crucial to the global economy and the tech industry's developments. Any conflict will inevitably trigger worldwide sanctions.
Taiwan is not Crimea.
It sits astride critical sea and air routes,
Anchors the first island chain, and lies at the heart of global high-end technology supply chains. Any attempt to replicate a Crimea-style move here would not just redraw borders, it would disrupt trade flows, military balances, and industrial systems worldwide. That difference raises the stakes, but it doesn't invalidate the method. The warning embedded in Crimea is simple and unsettling. The fastest move often matters more than the strongest argument. And that is precisely why capitals from Tokyo to Manila study 2014 so closely. Not to relive it, but to ensure they are not caught reacting to a new reality that has already been decided.
At first glance, the parallels are unsettling. Crimea in 2014 showed how power can move quietly before anyone agrees on what is happening. The playbook relied on gray zone pressure rather than open invasion, legal narratives instead of declarations, speed instead of scale. That logic still applies. Around Taiwan, similar tools already exist. Coast guards instead of navies, law enforcement instead of soldiers, information dominance instead of firepower. The goal is not immediate conquest, but rapid consolidation, to make the situation feel settled before the world has time to argue. What made Crimea work was not brute force. It was ambiguity. Masked actors, contested narratives, and procedural theater slowed outside response just enough. That is the part of the model that translates most easily. It buys time, and in crises, time is everything. This is where comparisons become dangerous if taken too far.
Crimea was continental. Taiwan is an island that forces any aggressor into air and sea denial contests from the first hour. Crimea sat on Europe's periphery. Taiwan sits on the main arteries of global trade. Most critically, Crimea was not embedded in a dense alliance network prepared for immediate spillover. Taiwan is. The security architecture linking the United States and Japan is far deeper than Western commitments to Ukraine were in 2014. Geography reinforces that reality. Japan's southwest islands lie so close to Taiwan that neutrality becomes more slogan than strategy. This isn't ideology, it's physics.
Then there's the economy.
The Taiwan Strait is a major shipping corridor, with one widely cited estimate noting around 44% of the world's container fleet moved through it in 2022. Taiwan also dominates advanced semiconductor production capacity, not total chips, but the cutting edge that modern economies depend on. Even conservative estimates show the shock of disruption would be global and immediate. In this scenario, events move faster than coordination. It begins quietly. Cyber disruption, electronic interference, psychological pressure on leadership and society.
A war between China and Taiwan is already well underway. Chinese cyber attacks on the territory have reached an unprecedented scale. Millions are detected each day.
Then comes a quarantine, a blockade light framed as customs enforcement or law and order activity. Key ports, airfields, and communications nodes are seized with minimal spectacle. Political pressure follows quickly, pushing for capitulation before resistance can organize. Governance is installed, and bargaining begins from a position of control.
到目前为止，它还不够这个实力嘛。但是我们不以此为自满，就是我刚刚有提到，我们要持续增加我们的防护力量，我们要持续提高我们这个豪租的力道。
The world reacts, but cautiously. Condemnations arrive. Emergency summits convene. Sanctions and export controls roll out. Capital tightens. Shipping insurance spikes. A recognition battle unfolds at the UN and in major capitals. The hardest question hangs unresolved. Does anyone try to reverse the new reality once it hardens? For Japan, this scenario is less about choice than exposure. Hosting major US forces makes base and rear area operations immediately relevant. Missile and air defense posture intensifies across the southwest island chain. Tokyo accelerates movement toward integrated deterrence and counterstrike readiness, not as a declaration of war, but as a signal that escalation will not be cheap. Local debates around islands like Yonaguni already show Japan is planning for spillover long before headlines force the issue.
For the Philippines, the first priority is human, not abstract, protecting citizens. More than 100,000 Filipinos live and work in Taiwan. Evacuation routes, airspace access, and port readiness become urgent realities. The second priority is territorial defense, especially around the Luzon Strait and the West Philippine Sea. Third comes alliance-enabled support, logistics, surveillance, and intelligence through EDCA sites, even if Manila avoids direct combat framing. Geography ensures involvement whether it is desired or not. Here, the plan unravels early. Intelligence leaks expose intent. Taiwan mobilizes sooner than expected. Partners surge ISR and visible presence. Markets react instantly. Shipping disruption and capital panic arrive before control is established. What was meant to be ambiguous becomes unmistakable. The escalation ladder activates. A quarantine turns into interception. Interception risks strikes. Costs pile up faster than gains. Japan accelerates operational coordination and missile defense readiness. The Philippines finds EDCA sites suddenly central for surveillance, refueling, logistics, and humanitarian response. Diplomatically, coalition building widens beyond Washington to include Australia and select European partners. Time, once an ally, becomes a liability. This is the least dramatic and the most stabilizing outcome. Taiwan denies speed. Command and control is hardened. Government continuity is preserved. Air defense is distributed. Anti-ship capabilities are made survivable. Ports and airfields are repaired as fast as they are damaged. Civil defense reduces panic and sustains resilience. The objective is not to win a decisive battle. It is to make every step slow, visible, and expensive. As time stretches, political returns shrink. Coalition support grows because diplomacy and logistics have room to function. The crisis remains severe, but it does not collapse into fait accompli. 2027 is not a prediction. It is a planning reference widely used to mark anticipated PLA capability maturation. Governments take it seriously because preparedness signals are already visible. Taiwan's defense spending trajectory reflects this mindset, with 2025 spending planned at roughly about $20.25 billion, around 2.45% of GDP, alongside political pushes for higher future targets. The emphasis is readiness, not inevitability. Taiwan's strategy is deterrence by denial. Asymmetric sea denial through mines and mobile anti-ship missiles. Air-based survivability and dispersed operations. Stockpiles of ammunition, fuel, and spares. Civil defense readiness and information resilience to blunt psychological pressure. Taiwan's goal is not to match China ship for ship. It's to deny a quick win. Washington operates through three toolkits. Militarily, forward presence, ISR, air-sea denial, and cyber capabilities. Economically, sanctions, export controls, and financial restrictions. Politically, coalition leadership, basing access, logistics coordination, and diplomatic unity. Trilateral signaling with Japan and the Philippines has already affirmed the importance of peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, framing the issue as systemic rather than bilateral. Tokyo's posture has shifted toward the Southwest Islands, integrated deterrence, and accelerated capability development, with a widely reported policy direction toward around 2% of GDP in defense spending by 2027. Japan isn't planning for war, it's planning to ensure war is not cheap. Geography is destiny. The Luzon Strait makes spillover unavoidable. Airspace, sea lanes, and evacuation routes intersect here. EDCA sites in northern Luzon and Palawan matter for logistics, ISR, and humanitarian response. At the same time, Manila must balance alliance cooperation with escalation sensitivity and domestic politics, a constraint that shapes every decision. Regionally, alliances harden and arms racing accelerates. Globally, shipping insurance spikes, trade reroutes, and advanced technology supply chains fracture. Normatively, a successful fait accompli becomes a template, signaling that speed and ambiguity still work.
What lowers risk is not rhetoric, but preparation. Faster allied decision-making, persistent ISR, pre-positioned logistics, resilient civil defense in Taiwan, and credible economic deterrence packages prepared in advance. If Taiwan is taken quickly, the region inherits a new reality. For deep analysis of contemporary issues,